The last thing I remember about my mother was her perfume. It was sweet, overwhelming, and clung to the air like a ghost long after she was gone. I was 8 years old when she left me. 8 years old when I learned what it meant to be disposable. It happened on a quiet afternoon. The kind of day where the world outside was calm, indifferent to the storm unraveling inside me. My mother held my hand tightly as we walked up the orphanage steps. I remember the way my small fingers slipped inside her grip, seeking warmth, seeking comfort. But her hand was cold. Unusually cold. "Where are we going?" I had asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. Her high heels clicked against the stone floor as we entered the building. I remember the smell, clean but old, with a faint trace of something metallic in the air. There were children playing in the corner, their laughter shrill and unfamiliar. A nun in a gray habit looked up from her desk, her eyes weary but kind. "Good afternoon," the nun greeted. "How can I help you?" My mother's grip on my hand tightened for just a second before she let go completely. My fingers twitched, wanting to reach for her, but something in my stomach twisted into a knot. I didn't understand what was happening yet, but my body did. "This is my daughter, Alina," my mother said. Her voice was steady, her usual poised tone, as if she were discussing the weather. "I can't take care of her anymore." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" My voice cracked. "Mama, what do you mean?" She didn't look at me. Instead, she placed a small bag, the pink one with the teddy bear patch, on the floor beside me. My stomach lurched. The nun's expression didn't change. It was as if she had seen this 100 times before. Maybe she had. "I'm getting married," my mother continued, her words clipped, efficient. "My new husband doesn't want," she hesitated, glancing at me for the first time, as if remembering that I was still standing there. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I already understood. Her new husband didn't want me. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I felt frozen, my small body trembling as I took a step toward her. "I'll be good," I whispered. "I promise. I won't be any trouble. I'll be quiet. I'll." "Alina." She sighed, and for the first time, there was something in her voice. Something close to regret. Or maybe I only imagined it. "This is for the best." She turned back to the nun, pulling a crisp envelope from her purse. "This should cover her expenses for a while." Money. That's what I was worth. I reached for her then, my little fingers grabbing the sleeve of her white coat. "Please, Mama, don't leave me." She pulled away. Something inside me shattered. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away, her perfume trailing behind her like a phantom. The sound of her heels echoed through the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until there was nothing left. She never looked back. I stood there, my body stiff, my hands clenched into fists. The nun knelt beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. "She's not coming back, is she?" I finally asked. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. The nun hesitated before answering. "No, child," she said softly. "She's not." And just like that, my world ended. But I didn't cry. Not that day. Not ever again. The orphanage was cold. Not just in the winter when the heat barely worked, but all the time, cold in a way that settled into my bones. Cold in a way that reminded me I was alone. The day my mother walked out of that door, I waited. I sat on my bed, staring at the entrance, convincing myself she would return. Maybe she had just made a mistake. Maybe she had gone to talk to someone and would come back for me, tell me it was all a cruel joke. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Reality set in like a slow-growing disease. She wasn't coming back. I learned quickly that no one in the orphanage cared about my heartbreak. The workers were overburdened, exhausted from the constant needs of too many abandoned kids. The other children had their own stories of pain, their own wounds, and no one had the time or patience to care about mine. The older kids bullied the younger ones, and the weak either learned to fight back or got eaten alive. I learned to fight. Not with fists, I wasn't strong enough for that. But with words, with silence, with sheer stubbornness. I refused to cry where anyone could see me. I refused to beg. I built walls so high around myself that even I forgot what was behind them. School was my escape. It wasn't much, just a public school where no one really expected us to succeed, but for me, it was everything. I had nothing, no family, no love, no safety. But knowledge? That was something I could claim for myself. I devoured books, memorized every lesson, outperformed every student in my grade. I didn't do it for praise, I did it because I knew that education was my only way out. No one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. But being the best in school came with its own problems. The other kids hated me for it. They called me names, made fun of my worn-out shoes, my hand-me-down clothes, the way my stomach growled in the mornings because sometimes dinner wasn't enough. The teachers either loved me or resented me, some saw potential, others saw an orphan girl trying too hard to be better than her place in life. At 16, I aged out of the system. They handed me a few bills, a list of cheap hostels, and a pat on the back. Good luck. That was it. No safety net, no one to call if things went wrong. Just me in the city that didn't care whether I lived or died. I worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my head. A diner during the mornings, a grocery store in the evenings, cleaning offices at night. Exhaustion was my constant companion, but I didn't let it break me. I saved every penny, studied whenever I had a free second. I refused to accept that my life would be nothing more than struggle and survival. I had bigger plans. I got into medical school on a full scholarship. When I received my acceptance letter, I locked myself in my tiny apartment bathroom and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because I had one. I had beaten every odd, proved everyone wrong. Medical school was brutal. The other students had families to support them, money to fall back on. I had nothing but my determination. I worked nights in the hospital as a janitor, cleaning the very halls I would one day walk as a doctor. I slept in breaks, ate whatever I could afford, ignored the loneliness that threatened to crush me. And I made it. After years of struggle, years of pushing forward when every part of me wanted to give up, I became Dr. Elena Vasquez. I had a name now, a title, respect. I had built a life from nothing, carved it out with my own 2 hands. I thought I had buried my past. I thought I had escaped the shadow of the girl who had been abandoned in an orphanage all those years ago. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because one day, out of nowhere, my mother reappeared. I almost didn't recognize her at first. It had been over 20 years since I last saw my mother. She had been younger then, beautiful in a sharp, effortless way. Her dark hair always perfectly styled, her eyes filled with something I once mistook for love. Now, she was older, worn down. Wrinkles lined her once flawless face, and her hair was streaked with gray. But the moment our eyes met, I knew. I knew exactly who she was. She had the nerve to show up at my hospital. My hospital. The place I had clawed my way into after she had left me to rot. I had just finished a shift, another 16-hour day, another round of exhausted interns trailing behind me, soaking in everything I taught them. I was heading toward my office when I saw her standing in the hallway, looking around like she didn't belong. Because she didn't. Her eyes landed on me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Elena?" It was the strangest thing. My heart didn't pound, my breath didn't catch, my hands didn't shake. I just stared at her, feeling nothing. She took a step closer, hesitant. "It's me. I know who you are." My voice was even, emotionless. Her face twisted, as if she had expected something else, tears, a reunion, maybe even relief. She had expected me to want her back. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make it seem like she cared. I wanted to find you for so long, but I didn't know how." I almost laughed at the lie. She didn't know how? She had chosen to disappear. Why are you here? I asked, cutting through her performance. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but then she sighed. I need your help. There it was. Of course she wasn't here because she regretted abandoning me. She wasn't here because she wanted to make things right. She was here because she needed something. I folded my arms. Help with what? She hesitated, then finally said it. I'm sick. I didn't react. I just watched her. She continued, as if she thought I actually cared. It's my kidneys. They're failing. I need a transplant, and the treatments, the dialysis, the medication, it's expensive. I can't afford it. Her voice cracked. Elena, I don't have anyone else. She said it like I was supposed to feel sorry for her. Like I was supposed to forget everything. The nights I cried myself to sleep in that orphanage. The birthdays I spent alone. The hunger, the loneliness, the endless fight to survive, all because she chose to leave me. And now, she wanted me to save her? A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Let me get this straight. You abandoned me when I was a child, dumped me in an orphanage so you could run off and play happy family with some man. And now, after all these years, you suddenly remember I exist because you need something from me? She flinched. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? I tilted my head. Tell me, did your new husband and his kids know about me? Did you ever mention that you had a daughter before you replaced me? She didn't answer. That was all I needed to know. I shook my head. You didn't come here because you wanted to find me. You came here because you're desperate. Because the perfect life you threw me away for didn't turn out the way you planned. Elena, please. Her voice was breaking now, her eyes glassy. She reached for my hand, but I took a step back. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I didn't have a choice. No. You did have a choice. My voice was sharp, cold. And you made it. You chose to leave me. Tears slipped down her face. I was young. I was scared. I didn't think I could do it alone. I let out a breath. And yet, I did. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to suppress her sobs. I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I am. I regret everything. She took a shaky breath. But please. You're my daughter. I'm your mother. I need you. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the words settle. She had no idea how much I had needed her back then. How much I had begged for her to come back, for someone to love me. And now, after all these years, the roles were reversed. Now she was the one begging. A part of me, some distant, wounded part, wanted to give in. To believe she had changed, that she truly regretted what she did. But the rest of me? The rest of me wanted her to feel what I had felt. To know what it was like to be abandoned. To suffer. I took a slow step forward, looking her right in the eyes. Then I spoke, my voice quiet but sharp as a knife. You're going to learn exactly what it feels like to be left behind. And with that, I turned and walked away. I expected her to give up after that. I expected her to realize that some things can't be undone, that some wounds never heal. But she didn't. She kept showing up. At first, it was just calls, numbers I didn't recognize, messages I never listened to. Then letters started arriving at my office, each one begging for another chance. I ignored them all. But when ignoring her didn't work, she got bolder. She started waiting for me outside the hospital. I'd walk out after a long shift, and there she'd be, standing near the entrance like some ghost from my past, her eyes hopeful, desperate. She tried to talk to me. Every time, I walked right past her. But she didn't stop. Then, one evening, she finally snapped. I had just finished a grueling day, 3 surgeries back to back, no food, no rest. All I wanted was to go home, collapse in bed, and pretend she didn't exist. But as I stepped outside, there she was again, waiting in the dim glow of the streetlights. "Elena, please," she begged, stepping in front of me. "Just talk to me." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I don't know how to make this clearer. I don't owe you anything." Her eyes filled with tears. I know that. But I don't know what else to do." Her voice cracked. "I have no one else." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my exhaustion from turning into anger. "Whose fault is that?" She flinched. No, I cut in, my voice sharp. "You don't get to play the victim. You made your choices. You chose him over me. You chose to pretend I didn't exist. You left me. And now you want me to drop everything and save you? Because suddenly, now that you're suffering, you remember I exist?" She sobbed. "I regret it every single day." I shook my head. "No, you don't. If you did, you would have come looking for me before you needed something." She fell silent, and I could see the truth settle in her face. She couldn't argue. She knew I was right. But then she whispered something that made my stomach twist. "I don't have long, Elena." I clenched my jaw. "That's not my problem." Her face crumpled. I just want a chance to make things right. To know you. Before it's too late." I let out a bitter laugh. "You should have thought about that before you abandoned me." I turned to walk away. And then she did something desperate. She dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk, sobbing. "Please," she choked out. "I'll do anything. Just don't leave me like this." I froze. For a moment, I was that little girl again, sitting on a worn-out cot in an orphanage, waiting. Hoping. For a moment, I almost let myself feel something. But then I remembered the hunger, the loneliness, the years of pain. I remembered all the nights I cried myself to sleep, praying for a mother who never came back. And suddenly, it was so easy to walk away. Because this was what she deserved. Let her beg. Let her feel what it was like to be discarded. Let her drown in the emptiness she had left me with. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. I thought that would be the end of it. That she would disappear, finally understanding that I wanted nothing to do with her. But then, one evening, an old nurse at the hospital stopped me in the hallway. "You have a visitor," she said softly. I frowned. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "It's your mother." I stiffened. My first instinct was to turn around and leave. But something about the way the nurse looked at me made me pause. "She's in bad shape," she murmured. "Didn't think you'd want to see her, but figured you should know." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked toward the waiting area, my stomach tight. And there she was. She looked worse than before. Her skin was paler, her frame thinner, her clothes hanging loosely over her body. She was sitting on one of the plastic chairs, hands trembling as she held onto a cup of water. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes filled with relief. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I didn't sit down. I just stared at her. "Why are you still here?" She exhaled shakily. I got admitted to a clinic downtown. They're helping me, but," her voice faltered. "I don't think I have much time left, Elena." Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "I just want to talk. One last time." I didn't know why I sat down. Maybe part of me wanted to see this through, to close whatever door had been left open between us. She swallowed hard, looking at me like she was afraid I would disappear. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fix. But before I go, I just need you to know. I never stopped thinking about you." I scoffed. "You had a funny way of showing it." She flinched but nodded. "I deserve that." She took a deep breath. "I was a coward. I thought I had to choose between survival and being your mother. And she swallowed hard. I made the wrong choice. I crossed my arms, watching her. And now you regret it because you're dying? Tears welled in her eyes. No. I regret it because I missed everything. I missed you growing up. I missed seeing the incredible woman you became. Her lip trembled. And that's a pain I'll never escape. I didn't respond. She let out a shaky breath. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if I could go back, if I could change everything, I would. I would have fought for you. I would have stayed. For the first time, she looked truly, deeply broken. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt tired. We sat there in silence, her watching me like she was memorizing my face, like she knew this was her last chance to be near me. Then, finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Elena. From the deepest part of my soul, I am so sorry." I took a slow breath. Then, carefully, I stood up. And I spoke the words that would decide everything. I stared down at her, the woman who had given me life and then abandoned me as if I were nothing. The woman who had built a new family, a new world, and erased me from it. And now, here she was, fragile and broken, begging for a second chance she should have asked for years ago. A part of me wanted to walk away. To let her feel the full weight of her choices. To let her understand, in these final moments of her life, what it was like to be discarded, to be the one no one came back for. I had spent my whole life clawing my way out of the pit she had thrown me into. I had fought through hunger, loneliness, and the kind of pain that never truly heals. I had learned how to be strong, how to survive, how to exist without love. Because of her. She had made me suffer. And now, I had the power to make her suffer. But as I stood there, something inside me shifted. I thought about all the years I spent waiting for her. About all the nights I had prayed she would come back, even when I knew better. I had hated her for so long, let that hatred fuel me, push me forward. And now, looking at her, I realized something. I didn't need that hatred anymore. I had already won. I had built a life without her. I had become someone despite her. She had no power over me. Not anymore. I took a slow breath and spoke, my voice calm but steady. I spent my entire childhood waiting for you. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. You never came. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. I don't know if I forgive you, I admitted. I don't know if I ever will. I tilted my head slightly. But I do know one thing. She held her breath. I exhaled. I'm not going to be like you. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, I pulled out a pen and a piece of paper, scribbled something down, and placed it in front of her. The name of a specialist, I said. One of the best transplant doctors in the country. Her lips parted in shock. I'm not doing this for you, I cut in. I'm doing this because I refuse to be the kind of person who lets someone suffer when I have the power to help. She sobbed, clutching the paper to her chest. Elena. I shook my head. This doesn't mean we're family. My voice was firm. This doesn't erase what you did. She nodded quickly, tears running down her face. I know. I took a step back. This is the last time we'll see each other. Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. I turned and walked away, my heart surprisingly light. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying her anymore. I had let her go.